In spring, nature gathers new vitality because the sun's shining more intensely again now. It's a time of growth when the course is set for the rest of the year.
It feels to me like the bees are really excited about being able to fly again.
Spring is the time of nature's rebirth. This is when all the young are born.
May is the best time of year for me, with its colors and scents. May is the time of the rose harvest. Given the weather, I'm sure the storks will come earlier.
The main thing is it doesn't snow anymore.
We can't send them a telegram telling them that the weather's good.
Spring makes a tentative start in the southern Alps. The summits are still covered in a lot of snow. When the snow starts melting, a new time begins for the animals. The calls of the brown bear herald the end of the hibernation period. He leaves his cave after 4 months. For bear expert Paolo Molinari and forester Francesca Di Lena, it's the first opportunity of the year to see the king of the forest face to face.
We don't know the exact reason why a bear wakes up and comes out of his cave. There are a lot of theories. They probably sense that the temperature's improving and that the conditions outside are good enough to get back into the daily fray of things.
Brown bears were almost extinct in the Alps, but in 1999, 10 animals from Slovenia were reintroduced in the province of Trentino in northern Italy. Since then, Molinari has been monitoring their progress. They've taken their sniffer dog to look for bears. Despite their size of 1.70 meters, it's rare to spot one of the bears. It's hard to find their tracks. Molinari's in luck. There are clear bear tracks in the snow.
Measure from here. It's quite a small bear. You can use the measurements to get a vague idea of size, but you can't pick out individual animals. It depends on their gait and how deep they're sinking into the snow, because that impacts on the size of their tracks.
Molinari wants to use a hare trap to find out which bears have already left hibernation.
We use this as a hare trap. We put some bait inside, and when the bear comes through here, he'll notice the bait. If he climbs over it or tries to get through underneath, he'll leave hairs somewhere.
Molinari can use the hair to determine the DNA and therefore the animal. The animals have thick fur, so the wire doesn't bother them much.
Damit der Bär da reinkommt, natürlich braucht's einen Grund.
The bear needs a reason to come in here, and in our case, that's scent. The scent we have here is a mix of rotting fish, which really stinks and is of interest to bears. And you can smell it from far away.
Geht dann auch noch relativ weit, der Geschmack.
The reason we're only using a small quantity is that we don't want the bears to use food resources provided by humans, because then they become habituated and they'll think human scent equals food. We don't want that.
Gedanken, Menschengeruch, Futter, das ist genau das, was wir nicht wollen. Komm, geh mal. Hoppeli.
Molinari has had success with the hare traps in the past. He's used them to obtain impressive footage of the bears.
Natürlich im Frühling, wenn wach wird.
When the bears wake up in spring, they're hungrier than at any other time of the year. That doesn't make them more aggressive. It just means they'll travel further, so they could come close to a farm or houses to knock over beehives to get at the honey. They're cheekier in spring than at other times of the year.
Sind sie sicher frech als normal im Jahresverlauf.
Beekeepers have to secure their hives.
Bären sind natürlich
Bears are very interested in honey,
interessiert an den
and if the bees aren't protected, then they'll just help themselves.
Einfach, dann haut
They'll
der
beat the honeycombs out of the hive, usually at night, when the bees aren't active. Then they can eat the honey.
Honig rausfressen.
The next morning, Molinari checks the hare trap.
We have some.
Molinari only touches the valuable evidence with gloves to avoid contaminating the sample.
So,
These are great hares. They're perfectly suited to genetic analysis.
eine genetische Analyse.
Molinari wants to play his part in having more bears return to and stay in the Alps.
Das Spannende ist einfach zu sehen, dass die
The most
Probleme,
exciting thing is to see that the problems that led to the animals becoming extinct are still the same ones now that they're returning.
Situation,
But the general situation has greatly improved. We've got more information and ways of analyzing and overseeing the problem of large predators living together with humans. So we can work to that end.
in diesem Sinne zu arbeiten.
Before the deciduous forest gets its canopy of leaves, special prospects develop for some organisms. The sun gets past the bare trees, warming the forest floor and awakening the first heralds of spring. Snowdrops make a start and defy the last cold snaps of winter. Hazelnuts are also among the early flowerers. Their pollen is vital for the bees that start their working year in early spring. When the spring sun lures them out of their hives, food's still sparse. Many freeze if the cold returns. It's a fate that beekeeper Norbert Purplau wants to spare his bees on the Swabian Alp. That's why he's searching for a suitable location for his hives.
As a beekeeper, you drive around with the eyes of a bee, and you see exactly what's good for the bees. The weather's crucial. It has to be right. Good weather alone isn't enough, though. You need a bit of rain, so that the nectar's nicely fluid.
As soon as the temperatures reach 10 degrees, the bees set off on their cleansing flights to discharge their waste. They keep an eye out for food. They need pollen because that's where they get the necessary energy from after the winter. And it also feeds the upcoming generation. Norbert Purplau is looking out for plants that have a lot of pollen and nectar.
It makes a real difference if the bees don't have to fly so far, because then they won't need as much for the journey, and they can bring more back to the hive. That's the reason why beekeepers look for places where there's enough food for their hives in the immediate surroundings.
The bee colonies literally grow with their tasks. The better the food supply, the stronger the hive can get. A suitable location has been found. Trainee beekeeper Killian is helping to set up the hives. Now they have to open up the flight hole so the bees can swarm.
Some are sitting around the flight hole, while others are flying circles around it. The bees are getting ready. They're remembering the location of their hive. They're in a new place now. We want the bees to become really established, so they can find the nectar when the fruit blossoms. Dandelion and oilseed rape are in blossom, so we have something to harvest.
Things are blossoming everywhere right now. The field work starts in March for the farmers. They have to sow and plant. First the oats, then the barley, and finally the potatoes. If you want a successful harvest, you have to cultivate your fields on time. The farmers wait for the right conditions for the right crops, which will only germinate when nature has given them the right conditions. Up until then, the crop's inhibitors prevent the seeds from germinating too early. It depends on the crop what causes these inhibitors to be broken down. That's often to do with temperature fluctuations, depending on whether it's getting warmer or colder. And the right soil qualities and the right moisture levels are important for the seeds to start germinating. Spring comes later to the North Sea. The large body of water stubbornly holds on to the winter cold. Until the North Sea shrimps move to the shallow water in the Waddenzee for the summer months in May, the East Frisian shrimp boats have to follow their prey. Captain Klaas Bruns is going out for the first time today after his winter break. He's off to Danish waters for 10 days.
You have to go out further because the shrimps are deeper in the wintertime. When it gets colder, they go deeper because it's a bit warmer there. In the summer, they come up again and spawn along the coast.
Klaas Bruns runs his fishing business in the 8th generation. His grandfather and father passed on their knowledge to him. But the competition among the fishermen keeps growing. Bruns is always searching for the best place to catch fish.
Some fish in one place, others go elsewhere. One catches more than the other. It's a matter of luck and experience.
It'll be 2 hours before Bruns and his deckhand Mark Kreuzer can get the nets in for the first time. They're going to spend the whole day fishing, 16 hours. And if things don't go their way, they'll stay out even longer than that. The first haul of the day will show whether Bruns has chosen the right strategy.
Ja, ich hätte ein bisschen mehr gerechnet.
It's not a good start, even though they catch particularly large, older specimens today that bring in more money than young shrimps. The nets could support 500 kilograms. Generally speaking, most shrimps are only around a year old when they're caught. The majority are females, because the male shrimps of the same age are smaller and don't reach the minimum size for edible shrimps.
That's the best thing about this job. Nice fresh shrimps.
Chop!
Maybe they'll have more luck at the next location. Bruns and Kruse face long weeks at sea. They'll only be able to fish off their native coast from the end of May onwards. Spring is a long time coming high up in the Pyrenees. France's best-known observatory is located at 2,877 meters on the Pic du Midi. The snow is still several meters deep here at the end of March. Nevertheless, the senior astronomer, Rémi Cabanac, can detect the start of spring in the heavens because of a special configuration of celestial bodies in the March night sky.
The spring equinox is a unique moment when the Earth approaches the sun. Day and night have exactly the same length all over the world. Here on the Pic du Midi, we see the spring sky on this day. The work is always the same, be it winter, spring, summer or autumn. But the objects we can observe in the sky are completely different. We lose them depending on the time of year and the position of the Earth.
The thin mountain air is ideal for observing the stars. The Bernard-Lyot telescope is awaiting use under its huge dome today at the spring equinox. But there are technical problems. The mood is tense. The fine adjustments for the telescope's pictures aren't working. The engineers have to solve the problem urgently, otherwise the telescope can't be used on this important day.
Ah d'accord, il vous est retourné là. D'accord.
Wear and tear are affecting this precision instrument. The technology was developed 35 years ago.
À chaque fois qu'on intervient sur le télescope,
Every time the telescope has technical problems, we're worried we won't be able to repair it. Then we wouldn't be able to work anymore. But so far, we've been able to fix everything. The situation makes me nervous, but I'm confident they'll cope with everything, and we'll be able to observe the stars tonight.
mais j'ai quand même confiance dans l'équipe et je sais que nous pourrons observer ce soir.
Cabanac can't do anything but wait while the repair works are ongoing under the dome. But in the end, the telescope's technical problem could be solved. These days, it's a computer that looks through the telescope. Instead of delivering a picture, it delivers numbers and data. It's only astronomers who can identify unique galaxies and constellations in these sets of figures. They can recognize the start of astronomical spring on the screen today.
Les saisons sont provoquées par l'inclinaison.
The seasons occur because the Earth's axis is tilted.
Au moment
At
de
the equinox, the Earth is parallel to its direction of movement. That means the day and night are exactly the same length. On the 21st of March, the spring equinox, the whole Earth, from the North Pole to the South Pole, gets exactly the same amount of sunlight, namely 12 hours.
12 heures. Ce sont les saisons intermédiaires.
From now on, the balance between light and dark is tipped in favor of increased daylight. Day length increases by 4 minutes a day. That doesn't just cause animals to come out of hibernation. The increased amount of light also has an impact on humans. Light triggers processes in our skin. It forms vitamin D. It's important for our immune system and bone health. People who live further away from the equator can only start forming vitamin D again in March, because in the winter months, the incoming rays of the sun are so shallow that the necessary UVB radiation can't get to the skin. And that means we use up our reserves. The power of the March sun can start recharging our depleted vitamin D stores. In Warmia, in northeast Poland, the continental climate produces long, hard winters. But spring has arrived here too now. The region's sparsely populated. It's a place of refuge for many animal species. Every year, storks come to Warmia from faraway Africa. They'll arrive here in a few weeks' time to raise their young. That's true for the village of Sivkovo, which they're particularly fond of. The 30 residents will be joined by around 70 adult storks. Władek Andreev loves the storks in Siskovo. That's why he's spent decades building platforms for them to nest on.
Before I started helping the storks, they fought for nests. So I started helping them by building nests for them. In the end, we had 20 nests on the farm. That was a great success. The storks choose their nest. You don't need to force them. You won't get anywhere with force. But sometimes you just have to help luck along a little, otherwise nothing will come of it.
Platform.
Andreev's wife, Anna, supports her husband. She's just as happy as he is to see the stork community grow every year.
I was born in Żywkowo. I've grown up with the storks. There weren't so many storks in the village in the past because there were more villages around. But over time, many of them have disappeared. And so more and more storks have started coming to Żywkowo with my husband's help. Now we wait for spring every year, for the storks to come. And when they fly off again, we miss them a bit.
Tourists and bird watchers from all around the world regularly visit the village. Their donations help with the construction of the platforms. Since the Andreevs gave up their farm and all 5 children moved out, guests are a welcome change, be they humans or birds. The storks have already set off from their winter quarters in Africa, but it takes them around 2 months to complete the journey of around 10,000 kilometers. Władek Andreev has a lot of respect for the feat of the travel-happy storks.
People go on holiday in cars, taking lots of things with them. Storks don't take anything. They just fly. They eat what they find on the way. They follow their instincts. This is their home. They only fly to Africa to drop off children or to recover. But they always come here to reproduce. It's hard work building such a nest. My old bones can't handle it anymore.
Запуйно, дядьку, до школи. Teraz jeszcze parę patyków.
Now we need brushwood. Grandma's bringing them.
No dość.
That's enough.
Spread the branches out and push them down with the wreath. The storks are to have something for when they arrive. Given this weather, I'm expecting the storks earlier than usual. They can sense that spring's on its way.
But what's the weather like in the south?
When they came last year, we still had far too much snow. It's much warmer this year. We can't send them a telegram, unfortunately, telling them the weather's good.
The storks don't need a telegram. They can sense when the time's right.
Indeed, the storks follow an inborn instinct when it comes to choosing the timing and route of their migration. The natural world will have developed rapidly by the time they arrive in April. At the beginning of April, the trees are still bare in Central Europe. Perfect conditions for logging by helicopter. Director of Operations Rolf Spichtich and Team Supervisor Severin Bühler are giving last-minute instructions in Zurich.
The goal for today is 200 flights for standing trees. We have to get them out. And then there are a good 200 cubic meters we have to fly out.
More than 100 rotten trees have to be flown out of the forest by helicopter before the birds can nest here. Pilot Roger Ming has experience with this method.
Heute fliegen wir Stehendholz.
We're flying out standing wood today, which means there's no room to log the tree.
Wenn der Baum noch steht.
It'll be attached to the helicopter rope while it's still standing.
Und je nachdem, wie schwer ist.
Depending on how heavy it is, it has to be cut into several pieces. We can take 2 tons. There'll be a climber on the tree who'll cut off a section and that'll be flown out.
Gleich stehend weggeflogen.
While the pilot's preparing for takeoff, the forestry workers set off for their area of operations. They're going to prepare the cargo for Ming. Everyone has to work perfectly to make the risky flight maneuver a success.
You can be the best pilot in the world, but you can't do it on your own. If the colleagues on the ground aren't doing their bit, it's no good.
The helicopter will lift the trees by ropes and hooks. The pilot is only allowed to drop the cargo in an uncontrolled fashion in an emergency. The helicopter's allowed to lift no more than 2 tons. That'd be ideal, but some trees weigh significantly more. The colleagues on the ground have to decide how to cut them up. Every job is a new challenge for Thomas Riebli.
When I climbed a tree the first time with the proper equipment, I was 19. It's always fascinated me. The higher, the better. The problem is, the equipment has to go up too. That's the exhausting part.
Das ist das Anstrengende.
While his colleague on the ground keeps him safe, Thomas Riebli uses a rope to mark all the spots where the tree's to be cut before the helicopter arrives.
Noch 200 Liter Most dabei.
Everyone's ready. It's important that the individual tree sections aren't too heavy.
The difficult thing for me is to position the hook 55 meters below the helicopter in exactly the right place for the colleagues on the ground, who will then hook the steel cable to it and tell me to tighten the rope. I have to do that in such a way that the fewest number of branches break off, so I don't injure anyone on the ground. Sometimes you can see how high in the trees you are because the helicopter comes quite close.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Then the crucial moment.
Braking slowly. It's off.
It's precision work that works in the team.
It's done. Roger Ming will take the tree to the unloading site, where his colleagues will load the trunks onto lorries. The men will cut down another 30 trees in this manner today. Soon the leaves will grow again, and the men have to stop their logging work. The trees get their first green shoots in mid-April. There's enough light and water to stimulate the plant's metabolism, triggering leaf growth. It's vital for trees to develop enough leaf mass in spring, because they can only photosynthesize with leaves. The leaves take carbon dioxide and water from the atmosphere and use light energy to turn them into sugar. The trees need sugar to provide them with the energy for their growth and metabolic processes. The more leaf mass a tree can produce now, the more energy it'll have later to develop its fruits. The leaves' photosynthesis is vital for people and animals too, because it releases oxygen as a waste product. The fruit blossom announces that spring is in full swing. Biologists look at the apple blossom in particular. It moves through Europe in a wave, from southwest to the northeast. By early May, the old fruit trees are in blossom on the Swabian Alp. Farmer Jörg Geiger's hoping for consistently mild weather. A night with frost could destroy the delicate buds. Bumblebees are taking care of pollination.
The pear blossom is almost over, as you can see. Now we get the apple. We'd like a bit more support with the apples, but our bumblebees are a bit lazy. There are only 50 to 100 in a box like that, while a honeybee colony has 25 to 30,000. Honeybees also focus on one crop. They'll concentrate on the apple. Bumblebees are too easily distracted.
But to make up for it, bumblebees also fly in rain and strong winds. They start flying at 8 degrees. Honeybees wait for it to be 12 degrees before they become active. The weather becomes warmer and more stable in time for the apple blossom. Beekeeper Norbert Purplau's bee colonies have grown to an impressive size thanks to the rich supply of food nature's providing them with. Now they're to pollinate fruit farmer Jörg Geiger's apple trees.
The fruits get better the more the bees come. You get a better quality of fruit and they grow bigger.
Moving the bees is stressful for them. That's why they're moved in the early hours of the morning, before it's too warm. 3/4 of the crops that feed humankind are dependent on pollination by bees. If the fruit trees aren't pollinated, they won't bear fruit. This is the peak season for beekeepers.
jetzt kommen die Bienen für die Äpfel.
Prima. Grüß dich. Hallo.
Hallo.
Wir sind in der Vollblüte jetzt.
Ja, schön.
Und man hat einen guten Aussatz dieses
The
Jahr.
fruit trees are in full bloom. A single beehive is easily able to pollinate 1 million flowers a day.
Schon locker 1 Million pro Tag. Gut. Also, ich hoffe, so viele sind da.
Now the bees need a suitable place to swarm. Sun in the morning and shade in the afternoon would be ideal.
Toll.
Hier wird,
The men take a look at several locations.
ich glaube, auf der Seite. Ach, da unterm Baum, da würden sie doch gut stehen. Stellen wir sie da ein.
A bee's flight radius is 3 kilometers. That's enough to pollinate all the trees in the orchard. Norbert Perplau's colleague Sven Heusener makes sure the hives are level.
Let's see if there are bees inside.
Bin jetzt aber
I'm curious and a bit scared.
Don't be scared. They're in there.
Hier sitzen sie schon.
Und was erkennen Sie
How do they know which is their box? Is it through scent?
Duftmarke, oder?
Also, die ist einmal der Duft innen drin. Die Königin hat einen besonderen
There's
Duft.
the scent. The queen has a special scent that keeps her bees together. And then they fly bigger and bigger circles around the hive. At first they fly just around the hive, and then they go further and further out. And they remember the landscape by light and dark markers. When they fly up the hill, they only see in black and white during their rapid flight. They know how often they passed light dark. That's their mileage counter. And then they tell each other, you have to fly in that direction, towards the sun, past the light and dark this many times. Then you'll get to the
So
food.
oft an hell und dunkel vorbei und dann kommt die Tracht.
In 2 weeks' time, the beekeeper will move on with his hives. The fruit farmer can only hope the weather will stay as perfect as it is now. In the Camargue on the French Mediterranean coast, the temperatures in May are already very summery. Bulls and Camargue horses live in the salt flats, shaping the image of the region. Many of the free-range animals around Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer belong to the Theroux family. Today's a special day. Owner Olivier Theroux wants to mark the young calves with his family's brand. They're big enough for that in mid-May.
Le moment important du marquage.
The moment of branding is the first contact between the animal and man. It's the first direct encounter.
Contact direct avec nous.
We try and keep it as short as possible for the animals to prevent too big a shock.
Un trop gros choc dans sa tête.
We don't want them to suffer, and they should be scared as little as possible.
Dans sa peur.
We try and make it as pleasant as possible for the animals.
Possible pour que ça soit le plus agréable possible pour lui.
Olivier Theroux and his team ride out to round up the bulls to be branded. Rider and horse have to work well as a team. Marco Dufour's the most important man today. He's from the French Alps, a former ski champion. He's familiar with speed and danger, but he too has respect for the task of rounding up the bulls.
C'est un moment assez intense.
It's an intense moment. Tough, but intense. It's very nice to do this. There's always a certain risk. The bull can break something, or we could hurt ourselves. There's always something that could happen, but we do it anyway. It's nice. It's a tradition. It gets the adrenaline pumping. You're out in nature with the animals. I love that.
First, the riders have to separate the young animals from their mothers. That won't be easy. But the calves are still young enough for the riders to overwhelm them for branding. Success. The hunt can begin.
C'est toujours un petit peu dangereux de monter à
There's
cheval,
always the danger of falling off the horse, but you trust the other riders.
Ensuite, quand on va tomber le veau,
It can happen that the horses stumble over the bulls when we get them to fall, or that they miss it when the bull changes its direction. Then we fall off.
et nous, on peut tomber avec nos montures.
Take the rope, pull.
Yana, tire la corde.
Attends, il est où Daniel? C'est Daniel.
The young bull is full of adrenaline.
Allez, Cri-Cri, allez, allez. C'est bon. Olivier, c'est bon?
After a brief fright, the animals are immediately released again.
On va en faire un autre.
We'll do another one right away. But this one worked very well. It fell exactly where we wanted it to. We brought it to the fire and branded it. Now it's back with the other animals. It's happy, and so are we. That's great.
Nous aussi. C'est chouette.
Who knows? Maybe the bull calves will soon be the new stars of the local arenas. In the bloodless fights, man and beast meet on a level playing field. Further north, in the Warmia region of Poland, there are lots of storks circling in the sky at the end of May. They're looking for food. Their young have been born and want feeding. But the Andreevs' nest platform has remained empty up until now. In the past, however, the adult storks have switched to an additional nest when their young got too big. So there's a chance still. But how many nests are there in Żywkowo this year, and how many chicks do they contain? The Andreevs do an inventory every year.
Tam z lewej strony.
There are 3 chicks in the tree.
A na tym nie, na tej gałęzi na razie nic nie widać, ale tu widać, że spore bocianki.
Wardek Andreev has spent many years lovingly looking after the storks. That's why tourists started calling him the King of the Storks. He once had the most nests in the village on his old farm.
There'll be eggs. Humans do it for fun. So why not storks too? Almost everyone's collar is worn because they're looking up. Where are the stalks? Who'll spot the first one? If we didn't have the stalks, we could get scared of the quiet here.
But it's this quiet in the sparsely populated Varmia region that's ideal for the storks and their young. They can raise their chicks in peace until they're strong enough for the long journey back to Africa. It'll be light for almost 17 hours. It's the longest day of the year. It's the astronomical start of summer. The plants use all the daylight to photosynthesize, and they produce energy-rich substances they need for their growth and for maturing their fruit. The local apple trees have to make an important decision now. Many fruits are ready to grow, but how much energy from the sun and water can the leaves really harness? How many fruits will be able to ripen? The tree decides and only keeps the fruits that can and should ripen. It sheds all others. This phenomenon is known as the June drop. There's a tantalizingly sweet scent over the valley of Grasse. Once a year, for 4 weeks, the buds of the Provence rose open. It's an important moment for breeder Carole Biancalana, because from her roses, she extracts the exquisite scent used in a Parisian luxury perfume.
The Provence rose is an unusual and valuable rose that only grows in this region. We have the right amount of sunlight and a special geographical location between the mountains on the one side and the sea on the other.
But it's a tough journey to get to the exquisite perfume. The harvest time for the roses has only just begun. They're picked from the morning until noon.
It's really important to harvest in this narrow window every morning, no matter what, because that's when they reach their scent maximum.
The success of the harvest doesn't lie entirely in human hands. Storms or heavy rainfall could destroy the delicate flowers. In fact, a bad weather warning has been issued for today. All the open flowers are picked as quickly as possible. They have to be very careful.
We try to pick the flowers carefully to avoid damaging them, because we want to preserve all their perfume. The main thing isn't to do it quickly, because then we rip the buds. We also have to think of the upcoming harvest days, so we have to be careful.
They're making good progress. And the weather's playing ball. In the neighbouring field, Carole's father is already taking care of the next generation of roses. He's known the soil and the flowers from a young age. The family have been growing roses for 85 years. But then the family tradition was threatened. Carole, the daughter, didn't at first want to have anything to do with growing roses. She went to university, but came back in 1999.
I didn't think my daughter would come back. The work is tough and full of privations. I wasn't sure if anyone would continue the business. It was like a miracle. I was as happy as a fish in water.
It's noon. The harvest is brought in and taken straight to the factory. The flowers have to be processed as quickly as possible. The scent of the Provence rose will now be extracted from the thousands of petals. They harvested an impressive 150 kilograms today. The refining process is elaborate. Every perfumer has his own secret recipe. "20 grams of extracted rose scent. A kilogram costs more than 10,000 euros.
Ça sont mes fleurs.
These are my flowers, in all their complexity. The way I smell them in the field, but with an intensity and an additional note because it's hyper-concentrated.
Hyper, super concentré.
Bull farmers, loggers, shrimp fishermen, stork sponsors. Different lives, one shared goal, following the rhythm of nature through the seasons.